Hello and welcome to episode number 332. This is the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com, and I'm Cornelius Fichtner. Hi there. What is the definition of the project sponsor role? If you have an executive sponsor on your project and you have a documented and agreed upon project sponsor definition, then you are exceptional. Are you PMP certified and want to earn 37 PDUs quickly and for less than $5 per PDU? No problem with the Agile Prepcast. It not only prepares you for the PMI ACP exam, but also qualifies for a ton of PMP PDUs. Visit agileprepcast.com/PDU for the details. So why are you exceptional? Well, according to Todd Williams' latest white paper, Challenges in Executive Sponsorship, the lack of project sponsor roles and responsibilities is a major issue. It's right up there with lack of engagement, missing change management, and the fact that executives don't even acknowledge that these challenges exist, to name just a few. This executive sponsorship white paper is at the core of our discussion. Todd and I will review the identified challenges and give you the solutions he proposes. You'll even get his definition of the role of the project sponsor. But most importantly, Todd is making this project sponsorship white paper available to you for free. The paper normally costs around $15, but if you use our discount coupon, then you'll get it for free. So please visit pm-podcast.com and look for episode 332 to find the link and coupon code. The coupon code expires at the end of October 2015, so hurry up or you'll have to pay the full price after that. And now let's all define project sponsor. And please enjoy the interview.
Project Management Podcasts Feature Interview.
Today with Todd Williams, expert witness, executive consultant, and president of eCameron.
Hello, Todd. Welcome back to the Project Management Podcast.
Well, thank you for having me back. It's not just me coming here; it's you inviting me, and I am just totally honored to be on here again.
So we want to talk about challenges in executive project sponsorship today. What can our listeners expect to get out of this discussion?
Well, I think that what we need to take a look at in project management is where some of these holes are that are still creating problems and getting it so that projects don't execute correctly. And the two areas that I think we've landed on here is looking at sponsorship and change management and those two items. So we're really trying to focus on one of those two major holes of what is a sponsor, what are they supposed to do, and how they're supposed to do it. If there's no one out there in your PM audience that doesn't agree with this next statement, I would be totally shocked. And that is, I think that every single project manager will say about sponsorship is, my sponsor's not engaged. And what does that mean? How do we solve that? And how can we work that at our level? Or do we have to go up a higher level and actually get that to work at a higher level?
All right. The discussion is based on your white paper. You did some research for that. Why did you do this research into sponsorship in the first place? What was the initiator here?
So we had a very reputable medical organization, which I really shouldn't name, out of the Midwest, get a hold of us and say, we need some training in executive sponsorship. And I went, whoa, you guys have a big name and you need training in executive sponsorship. Is this something that is just in the healthcare industry, or am I missing something else somewhere else? So we went out and we interviewed a whole slew of different healthcare organizations, primarily hospitals. If they had a research arm, that was great. But we did as small as a 100-bed hospital, community hospital, up to a large, very reputable medical research facility, clinic, hospital that we had contacts in. And we started interviewing those people. We started seeing that there were some really serious problems. and they manifested kind of weirdly, and there were some really enticing, juicy little pieces in there, which I'm not going to divulge right now. And so I had to expand it. And I went outside the healthcare industry, and I started talking to people in other industries and realized that this was a bigger piece of a problem that I didn't fully understand. So as I did my research, I went, wait a minute, I just can't keep this to myself. I have to go and publish this in some sort of white paper so people understand what these challenges are. And then hopefully soon we'll actually have another white paper out that's going to talk about how to solve some of those problems.
I know from reading the paper that one of the problems is actually the definition of sponsorship, the role of sponsorship is lacking. But to bring us all on the same page here, can you give us your definition? What is a sponsor? What does a sponsor do on a project?
So a sponsor is an interesting role. They're executives. And so they have to have still that executive's arm's length. They can't get into the details and the minutia of the project. So we really need to make sure that they're doing an executive type interaction with the project. They're not doing things like writing the charter. So I think there's really about 3 different responsibilities that a project sponsor has to have in a project or a set of projects, because it could be at the program level. I think the first and foremost is they have to create and maintain a project vision that's aligned with the corporate goals. So they're the ones who are saying, here's what we're trying to do. Here's the vision for this project or program. And here are the corporate goals it aligns with. Now, as the corporate goals drift because of the business environment, then the sponsor is responsible and accountable to actually make sure that the project drifts equally with those business goals to make sure it stays in a valuable position. Otherwise, if it doesn't move or it moves the wrong direction, then all of a sudden all value is lost and we have a real problem. So 1, create and maintain a project vision that is aligned with the corporate goals. Number 2, organizational change management. We're about ready to do something. Any project is giving a capability to an organization. And if that capability is new, it has to be. That's why we're doing the project. People are going to have to change. Now, back in the old days, when you're building a road or you're building a pyramid or whatever it was you were building, there wasn't a lot of organizational change management. If there was a road, people would use it, build it, they came. But whenever you're talking about things that are changing business processes and how businesses work, you have to get people to adopt things. So organizational change management, OCM, or adoption, whatever you want to call it, they have to be accountable for that. And they're the ones who have to drive that. They're the ones who have to create that excitement and fervor. They have to stay engaged with the project throughout the length of the adoption life cycle to make sure that people pick that up. And lastly, they need to have fiduciary responsibility. Now, I'm not saying financial responsibility. They're not necessarily the ones providing the funds. They're not the ones who are going to go out and get more funds. They have fiduciary responsibility. They're making sure that the project is minding and staying inside the fiduciary realm that it needs to for the corporation or the organization. So it could be that it goes over budget, but that's fine if it's returning the value that is commensurate with that. So they have not the budgeting and the detail, the numbers and all that, but they maintain that fiduciary responsibility. So that's number 3. So I see those 3 things as alignment. Once again, 1, alignment with corporate goals. Organizational change management is number 2. And number 3 is fiduciary responsibility. So those to me are the real responsibilities of what a project sponsor has to do. Now, you could throw some other things in there, but I think that's pretty much it. The other factor in this, Cornelius, is not these hard roles and responsibilities. It's the traits of the sponsor. They're the most important. You know, you can sponsor a project, but if you're not a very good leader, tell me, Cornelius, how do you think that project's going to run?
Yeah, that's not going to work, is it?
Not going to work. So you have to have leadership. You have to be able to create that vision and get people involved and get them to move with it. So they have to have the traits of a leader. They have to have belief in the vision that has been or they have created, they have to be able to really have that passion about the project to get it to move forward. They have to stay engaged. That is part of making sure that adoption happens. Just making sure that you're continually communicating. You're getting the short-term wins that need to be there. All these things that have to be involved in a project. I'm not saying it's easy. This is pretty hard stuff. They have to be the key decision maker. When something can't get done, they have to have that decision-making capability. They can't keep deferring decisions to someone else. If they don't have that good decision-making trait, they're in trouble. And finally, they have to be respected and trusted. Because if you don't have that respect and trust, you're going to lose credibility, and the project's going to go nowhere. So those are the things I see: responsibilities and true responsibilities, and also traits in these softer skills that the sponsor has to have.
Your paper actually says, yes, we have problems, and here they are. We're going to look at them in a little bit in more detail. But let me ask you this first. Are these issues actually being recognized as issues and addressed and talked about?
That's a tough question. I think it really depends on who you talk to and how they view in their role, how they view the project and their role in the project. There are some organizations that don't feel that a project is successful unless it's adopted. Other companies and organizations feel a project is successful if it meets scope, schedule, and budget. If no one uses it, that's not the project's fault, right? So now that really means the role of the sponsor who is over that project in both of those cases is very, very different. The organizations that look and say adoption is really critical part of the project's success understand that there's more problems with sponsorship than ones who just think that the project is scope, schedule, and budget. And if it meets scope, schedule, and budget, then it's okay. So it dices a couple of different ways. So what you see in the project managers a view of the project sponsor as saying, we've got real problems with the project sponsor, regardless of what model we're in. If we're in the scope, schedule, budget model, they're not paying attention to us because, well, they really don't care. They have bigger fish to fry, unfortunately. And one of them is they're trying to take care of that end user community, and they may be looking at adoption and not even having people understand that on the project. If you're talking about a project that has scope, schedule, budget, and adoption as part of the adoption process, they're saying, wait a minute, it just isn't working right. And so people understand that. At the executive level, it's only adoption that they're really worried about. So they see a problem if you have adoption in the equation. If you don't have adoption in the equation, they don't see a problem.
Our listeners are project managers. You already mentioned in the beginning, and this is a given, my sponsor, there's a lack of engagement. Are there any other problems that project managers pointed out to you during your research?
Well, the biggest one they didn't point out to me, it just came out, and that is that there is, and I don't think this is in the white paper because some of this came out after the white paper was actually written, and that is that although the project managers had general agreement on what a project sponsor was, some of the items they threw into this project sponsor's hat was wrong, okay? So they would do things like say, I had a lot of people coming back saying, hey, wait a minute, the project sponsor is responsible for the charter. And I just don't see that. I mean, it's very clear. I don't care what methodology you're using. The project manager is responsible for the project charter. The project sponsor may provide items and certain sections of the charter, but they're not responsible for the charter. It is truly the project manager. So I saw a lot of project managers giving tasks to the project sponsor that didn't belong to the project sponsor at all. So that was the biggest thing. What is that project sponsor supposed to do? So we get back to that definition. And if we could get the definition anchored and get a generally accepted definition of what a project sponsor is supposed to be, I think that some of that rumble from the PMs about how bad a project sponsor was would go away, and it would be changed and replaced by the project sponsor is not taking care of accountability or adoptability, and they're not working with the end users to make sure that they adopt things correctly. Or I've been trying to understand what we're supposed to be doing financially here, and I can't get an answer from my sponsor. I'm trying to get a change put through, and they're just sitting on it. They're not telling me what's going on. That gets back to that alignment thing with goals. Do you understand? So I think that you would see a change, and it would be more specific, because right now, whenever a project manager says, my real problem with my sponsor is they're not engaged, what does that mean? That's so vague. What is engagement? And we can't answer that unless we have a definition to understand what they're supposed to do so that we can say measurably they're engaged or not engaged.
Let me guess. If you ask the same question to the executives, to the sponsors, is there a problem in sponsorship? The answer is probably going to be, no, there is no problem.
Correct. There is no problem because the executives changed the definition of the sponsor to match their capabilities. So I just change it to match the situation, and I no longer have a problem.
That's one way to get rid of it.
Well, exactly. I mean, I'm going to redefine my success criteria to match what I just did, so therefore I'm always successful.
All right. A much better way of actually addressing this is to solve the problem with ideas. And you had a number of items listed in your white paper to help solve the problem. So I'd like to review them with you here. There are about 4 or 5. Mm-hmm. I'll just give them to you, and then you can run with it. The first one you mentioned in your white paper, leadership. How does that help us?
Well, a leader really rallies people. They get people involved. They get them excited. They have a set of characteristics that really are traits that we really want to follow and move to. So you've heard me talk time and time again about how project managers have to be leaders. So do sponsors. I mean, we've gone as far as we're now, really pushing this whole leadership thing, and we're promoting regional leadership forums around the country because we really think that people need to get into that leadership program or a leadership program and improve their leadership capabilities. And RLF is just one of those programs. And so with that capability, now the project sponsor can move all the people they have no authority over because they have those traits and capabilities. They can work with the project, they can work with the end user, they can work with the other executives on the team. Now we have to remember that the life cycle of adoption is much, much larger than the life cycle of the project. Life cycle of adoption starts way, way back at the business case, long before the project is even thought of in many respects. And it has to continue on way past project delivery in maybe 6, 12, or even more months after that delivery to make sure people adopt things. So that those leadership capabilities helps you to go that huge long distance and steer away from all the landmines as we go through it. Does that help out? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. It also leads nicely into the second item you listed, and that's accountability for project success. That's pretty much what you started to talk about here.
Yes,
right?
Exactly. That is the footprint, the foundation of how you get to project success, because project success, it has to be adopted in I don't care what definition you're looking at. The project has to be adopted to actually be successful. If I build a bridge and nobody uses it, I can't claim success. I have to be able to have people using it. Now I can claim success. I have to be able to look at some sort of ROI of some form, maybe not just monetary, but some way of saying I've actually got things done and done correctly and people are using it. And the only person who lives on that stream, that adoption life cycle, as I'm calling it, long enough is that project sponsor. They're the ones who see the business case and get down to the point of, yes, everybody's using it.
Communicate priorities is the third item in your list.
Yeah, one of the things that contributes, that very, very clear, that contributes to this lack of engagement of sponsors is the sponsor all of a sudden gets a bigger fish that has to be fried. And so all of a sudden they disappear from the scene. The project manager's going, hey, wait a minute, what happened to my project sponsor? Well, just ask them what their priorities are. Well, I know we were supposed to be building this new system for, bringing in customers, but what we just found is we lost 50% of our market share on the product that gives us 80% of our revenue, and I need to go work on that. And your project now just kind of like fell off the plate and has no priority anymore. Communicate those priorities so people know. And then it's the project manager's responsibility to say, well, okay, so if we're that low a priority, should we kill the project? And should we take my resources that we have working on my project and have them help you over there on that other project and whatever it is that you're working on? Look at those priorities, but that all comes from the project sponsor doing a good, solid communication of what has to go on.
We've talked about this previously. Common definition. I assume that's the definition of the role of the sponsor.
Yes, what the sponsor is supposed to do, what they're responsible for, what they're accountable for, and what they're supposed to do, day-to-day activities within the project or around the project. Because again, their life cycle with the adoption, for instance, of that product from the project is going to be longer than the project itself. So they have to know what they're doing on both sides. And without having that simple even job definition given to them, it's free reign. They can do anything they want.
The fifth and final item on your list of things that help us overcome these issues takes us right back to where it all started. Sponsor training, because this is how you got into this.
Yep.
Sponsor training, how does that help us?
Well, somehow we need to get to a point where the project manager and other people in this project realm are actually anticipating the same moves, seeing what people are doing. Now we're talking about executives, so we're not going to send them to Excel training. This has to be something that is very concise, gives them a very short, succinct roadmap of this is how I'm supposed to work in this realm. These are my responsibilities. They then have to coordinate with the project manager and other people or project managers that are on the project. Maybe there's business project managers, delivery project managers, et cetera, and set that communication scheme, set those standards and where those lines are of who does what and how. Okay. And they need to understand what it means. For instance, if I'm going to make them accountable for organization change management, for adoption, then what are the KPIs? What are the measurements that I'm going to use throughout the project to say, okay, we're only 10% of the way through this project, but we think we're going to adoption because of the fact that we've done A, B, and C, and we've gotten buy-in from the end users. So they need to have some of that understanding of how they're going to integrate their changes, their change management and adoption progress in the program or project itself to see how they're doing along that line.
All right. You've done the research. You understand the problems, the issues. You have solutions. You've written the white paper. So how does your company, eCameron Incorporated, help your customers resolve these sponsorship issues on their projects? What do you do for them? If I needed you, what could you do for me?
Well, what we actually do is we'll come in. So let's back up a second. So part of the reason that we exist is because we come in and fix failed projects or projects that are in real trouble. People they're struggling trying to run projects reproducibly and successfully. And so what we do is we come in and either fix the project or help mold the organization and make those changes better, right? So this is just one of those areas where we see these two holes in how organizations work, both from sponsorship and adoption of the project's product. And we'll come in and say, okay, how have you defined your sponsor? We have templates, of course, that we use to say, here's what we think the definition should be. How does that fit into your culture? How does that work? Maybe it needs to change a little bit here or a little bit there to better suit your organization. What are you doing from adoption standpoint? How does that fit in? And use those tools. If you look at how some companies do adoption, The ones that are probably the best for doing adoption are heavily regulated, like avionics industries, where they got the FAA on top of them. And do you really want to take that huge rigor and apply that adoption philosophy to an internal adoption when you're just trying to get somebody to use a new travel request form, right? What is that process that you need to implement that has the same rigor, but it's lean so it works better? And how does that work in the organization? So we'll help them mold that and scale that to something that works best for them.
Yeah, and let's also not forget, mentioned this earlier on, this white paper called Challenges in Executive Project Sponsorship, and you're currently working on the follow-up to this, Solutions in Executive Project Sponsorship. And I definitely want to bring you on and talk to you about those solutions as well, once it's ready.
That'll be about 5 times the size of the current, of the current white paper.
6 interviews. Perfect. To close our conversation right now, what can our listeners, they're all active project managers, they have their daily challenges on their projects. What can they do today on their own projects to recognize, we have a problem with sponsorship, and what should then be one of their first steps, the first few steps in order to address this?
Have a meeting with your sponsor.
All right. Thank you for coming by.
Yeah. So it literally is sit down with your sponsor, highlight some of these issues and say, do you understand what it is that I'm really expecting of you? And what is it that you're expecting of me? Too many times we look at that sponsor, especially because they're an executive sponsor, and we think, well, I can't tell them what to do. But that's not true. Time and again, we've found that people don't talk to the executives and give them tasks and tell them, here's the problem, here's what I need you to do. And we find that whenever we go in and actually do that in organizations with struggling projects, the executives are more than excited to actually help. And they're saying, hey, thank you for telling me what I need to do because I didn't see what I needed to do here. This is great. And so they do help and they want to help. So sit down and talk to your sponsor. Figure out where they're at, what you need from them, and what they need from you. Figure out where that line needs to be, because it's going to be a little bit of negotiation, because especially if it isn't defined in your organization right now. So that truly is step one. Step two, then, is to figure out who's taking care of adoption. Have that conversation with them. You may be saying, hey, I'm not responsible for adoption. I am only supposed to do scope, schedule, and budget. And you may find them coming back and saying, whoa, wait a minute. You've got to have this in here. Well, it's not in my tasks. It's not in my budget. It's nowhere in here. We need to solve this problem. Now you have an issue to work with your sponsor and figure out how that's supposed to move forward. Adoption, organizational change management is not taskless and hard task schedule things. There's a lot of warm, fuzzy, cuddly things that go on, which some of us project managers might not be as comfortable with. So maybe we even need to have somebody in the organization or in our project that is helping with that change management and getting people to walk through some of these changes in a more soft and subtle way. Okay? So that would be number two, is to take up the adoption process. Now, as far as leadership goes, well, actually, you're taking up the leadership, because if you go have those conversations and you're driving that conversation and having those critical talks with your sponsor, you actually stepped into the leadership role. So hopefully that rubs off. Your sponsor figures out, oh, wait a minute, we need some leadership in here, and they help you balance that out. But that steps up your game significantly and hopefully pulls the project sponsor along with you.
Excellent, Todd. Thank you so much for stopping by today and not only talking to us about the challenges in executive project sponsorship, but how to solve them. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you very much, Cornelius. Great talking to you.
And that was our sponsorship interview with Todd Williams. And that's it. Thank you very much for listening. As always, you can find us on the web at pm-podcast.com. Please send your emails to info@pm-podcast.com. And when you write, yeah, you know, right? Please do tell me where in the world you are writing from. And please don't forget that the white paper we talked about is available for you for free until the end of October 2015. please visit episode 332 of the Project Management Podcast for the details. And finally, and since we are talking about sponsors, we have this. Nothing is impossible for the person who doesn't have to do it. Until next time.